Have you ever heard about the Big Void, discovered over the descending passage of the Great Pyramid by the entrance? How it was found and why it was not discovered before? What have people found inside the void? Is it just a corridor, or maybe it hides the way to the real pharaoh's burial? In this video, based on Keith Hamilton materials, we're trying to answer these questions and review evidence we have, but we still have more questions than answers. Let's deep into mysterious void together. In this old image, we are looking at the entrance to the descending passage of the Great Pyramid. The figures above give a good indication as to the size of the masonry used in its construction, especially the huge ceiling stones which cover the passage, which the top figure above is sitting on. Above this figure in the background, we can see some pent beams that are often referred to as chevrons. In this more modern image, we can see that another pair of chevrons sits on top of the pair visible in the last image. These were not the only chevrons to occupy this area, as fragments exist of other chevrons placed in front of these. The inclined support beds for these further chevrons can be seen middle right in the above image. Flinders Petrie was probably the first explorer to examine these chevrons in detail, he reports. These blocks are much like a slice of the side of a casing stone in their angle, but their breadth and length are about half as large again as any of the casing stones. Their mean angle from 12 measures is 50 degrees and 28 minutes, with a variance around 5 minutes. The thickness of these blocks is only 33 inches, and there are no others exactly behind them, as I could see the horizontal joints of the stones running on behind them for some inches. On the faces of these blocks are many traces of the mortaring which joined to the sloping blocks next in front of them. These were placed some 70 inches lower at the top, and were not so deep vertically. By the fragment left on the east side, the faces of these blocks were vertical. In front of these came the third pair, similar, but leaning some 7.5 or 8 degrees, inwards on the face, judging by a remaining fragment. Probably a fourth and fifth pair were also placed here, and the abutment of the fifth pair shows in 70.5 degrees or 73 degrees in place of 50 degrees. The successive lowering of the tops, leaning the faces in and flattening the angle of slope of the stones as they approach the outside, being apparently to prevent their coming too close to the casing. Hello, dear viewer. Don't forget to subscribe and put a like. Enjoy the show. This picture is Petrie's drawing. This area has perplexed researchers for decades as to the function of all this skillful masonry work. Suggestions were made that these chevrons diverted and relieved weight above the descending passage, which led to the suggestion that the masonry above this location would hardly task the massive ceiling beams which already protected the descending passage. Moreover, the chevrons were limited to only a small area near the exterior, so why were the chevrons not continued along the descending passage, which would have a greater masonry load above them as it descended? This chevron feature above the entrance appears to be unique to the Great Pyramid, it being absent from other giant pyramids such as Khafre's and Sneferu's pyramids. These other pyramids seem to have no issue when it came to construction of their descending passages. So why was it a requirement in Khufu's pyramid? The whole area appears to have an illogical function, and yet building such a device some distance from the base of the pyramid must have had a logical function for the builders. An early attempt to explain the chevron area was by Bruchet, who produced this figure from his publication on the Great Pyramid. Here, he attempts to link the area with the movable door described by Strabo. A different suggestion would come from the publication by Gilles Dormion and Jean-Patrice Guadin. Here the authors would state, "This space implies the existence of a second entrance superimposed on the first." They would further add, "The existence of this corridor is also the only rational constructive response to the device above the entrance." In their drawing, you can see they show the chevron area as a maneuvering room, in order that plates of stone can seal the upper entrance. They would suggest that this upper corridor would continue horizontally towards the Grand Gallery, as you can see on the drawing. For location of Grand Gallery, take a look on Petrie's drawings. Here we see the horizontal corridor approach the top of the ascending passage, then inclining up towards the north wall of the Grand Gallery. Muon and Guadin would not be alone in suggesting a corridor from the area of the chevrons. Most people would be aware of the work of Jean-Pierre Houdin, and in the image we can see how he has a horizontal and ascending passage connecting to the area of the chevrons. Further reconstructions of his ideas can be seen on following pictures. These examples are just a selection of ideas in connection with the chevron area, but the idea that a corridor might exist behind them has been known for decades, and so it might seem surprising that the authorities have not took a greater interest in this area. Their interest appears to have been revived in 2016, when a void was detected behind the existing chevrons by the Scan Pyramids project. This 3D reconstruction is from their 2016 report. The Muon tomography scans cannot provide much in the way of detail, but more a fuzzy image indicating a possible void. So, to try and obtain a clearer picture of the void, further detectors were installed in various positions from 2016 to 2019 in the hope of getting a clearer picture of this area. This latest Muon study was published online on March 2023 to coincide with the media announcement on the same day on the Giza plateau. The Muon results indicated a north-face corridor behind the surviving chevrons as shown in their figure. The report states, the shape of the north face corridor, defined as a rectangular cuboid, was estimated to have a width of 2.02 meters with variance 0.06 meters, a height of 2.18 meters with variance 0.17 meters, and a length of 9.06 meters with variance 0.06 meters, 0.07 meter. The north face corridor appears to stop at the south side, and simulation confirmed that there is no structure with a cross-section of more than 1 meter on 1 meter further on the south. The bottom plane of the north face corridor is located at Z0.72 meter with variance 0.13 meter, which corresponds to -20 meter from the ground level. The east-west central axis of the north face corridor is located at Y0.03 meter with variance 0.04 meter, which is coincident with the center of the chevron. The distance from the north face of north face corridor to the north face of the chevron is 0.84 meter with variance 5 centimeter, which is about the same thickness as the massive limestone block of the chevron that can be observed from the outside, suggesting the north face corridor would be located just behind it. It seems that the authorities acted on this report and introduced an endoscopic camera through a gap in the masonry under the lowest chevron. My understanding is that no drilling was required in this operation, which begs the question, why was this not done decades ago? The endoscopic camera was placed through the arrowed gap above. The masonry blocks below the lower chevrons form a tympanum behind the chevron, and it seems that they would have to be laid first before the chevron was placed against it. The image from the Scan Pyramids project is the only view so far of the north face corridor. Here we can see further chevrons extending further south, where we come across a dead end, some 9 meters distant. Note depressions on end of chevrons, which may have held beams during installation. Picture dimensions for the north face. Corridor are uncertain, but at some 2 meter wide it is not a cramped space and allows for several workers to comfortably move about. It is early days yet on this space, and the data is very sparse, but it might be the case that the chevrons above are a direct continuation of the upper chevrons highlighted in the image. I don't know how the authorities wish to proceed with the exploration of the north face corridor, but one would think that some of the tympanum blocks will have to be removed in order to gain access. The tympanum can always be repaired after exploration. The interesting thing is that the lower pair of chevrons, when installed, effectively blocked access to the north face corridor. The image provided by the endoscopic camera certainly seems close to the floor of the north face corridor. As illogical as the exterior chevron area appeared, this new discovery only complicates matters even more. So what was its function? At a press conference on the March 2023 on the Giza plateau, Zahi Hawass made the following statement. "We cannot say it's a corridor at all. There's no way there is a corridor would be here, because down 7 meters, there's another corridor. Between the 7-meter and the tunnel we found today, there is something important, in my opinion, can tell us for the first time that the burial of Khufu is still existed, and this is what we could discover. I do believe that the area between the tunnel found and the descending corridor, it should be the real burial. This is my opinion only. The real burial chamber of Khufu should be underneath that tunnel. From the statement, Hawass does not see the north face corridor as a corridor, but more a weight-relieving device similar to the pent beams above the so-called relieving chambers above the king's chamber. And so somewhere in the yellow bounded area, shown left, could be the real burial of Khufu. But is there another possible explanation? The north face corridor looks to be quite a utilitarian space, something more in keeping of what we see inside the 5th dynasty pyramid of Neferirkare at Abu Sir. Here we have a similar horizontal corridor which leads to the king's chamber. This utilitarian corridor consisted of pairs of chevrons along its length. Inside this construction corridor, the fine masonry which made up the walls and flat ceiling of the horizontal passage would be brought in and assembled. There is probably 2 reasons why it exists inside Neferirkare's pyramid. The first is that this pyramid was the largest of the 5th dynasty, and they may have wished to give added protection to the passage below, and as well as, to ensure that the superstructure construction was not held up. The substructure chambers appear to have been built from the inside out, so by building the construction corridor with chevrons first, the superstructure can still advance above, even though the fine masonry of the passage below had yet to be introduced. Clearly, this is not the case for the newly discovered north face corridor. However, it could still act as a construction corridor. The image is from Borchart's publication and shows a similar but badly damaged corridor, which covered the destroyed horizontal passage below. For more information, we have to look on the Neferirkare pyramid. Unfortunately, this pyramid still awaits modern exploration, as only 2 explorers have been inside, that being Paring, who worked for Howard Weiss, with the last visit being by Borchardt, who published his brief findings in 1909. If the north face corridor was a corridor, where did it go to? When you look at Petrie's drawings, it would head to the north end of the Grand Gallery. This is the level when substantial internal chambers begin to be constructed. Prior to this level, we only have parts of the descending passage, which is mostly tunneled through the rock, and the ascending passage to construct. Most activity in chamber construction starts at the north end of the Grand Gallery. From here, towards the center of the pyramid, we also have the construction of the Queen's Chamber and passage. The Grand Gallery is a huge construction, and of course at its south end we have the King's Chamber. So in this area we have a hive of building activity. At some stage the Grand Gallery and the King's Chamber will be roofed, which closes off access to the workers, but there might still be vast amounts of work still to be done. These constructions may have been built with excesses of rock left on their faces in order to protect them during construction. Only after construction would the faces be dressed down. Traces of this was discovered by Petrie, who reports on the faint bosses left in the King's Chamber and the undressed area by the Queen's Chamber door. So, we might have a situation where the major internal elements are built but closed from the outside world, and yet a vast amount of work still remained in the final dressing of all these spaces. Closed to the outside world, the only route for the workers would be down the descending passage and then climb up the ascending passage, hardly a user-friendly route for the workers, never mind bringing in materials to do the job. It would seem easier for the builder to build a construction corridor from the north entrance direct to the area of most construction. Such a corridor would be beneficial to the area of main construction. For example, significant wooden scaffold might be required to dress the high places, such as inside the Grand Gallery. It might be difficult to turn lengthy items at the junction of the descending passage and ascending passage. Building such a construction passage to the Grand Gallery would not task the builders much compared to the benefits such a corridor would over, be it improved ventilation, ease of bringing in material and removal of debris, etc. At the moment, the north face corridor only extends some 9 meters, and we appear to have a blockage at its end, so if this is the start of a construction passage, we should expect it to continue past this blockage. The blockage itself might just be a blocked-up corridor, and hence why the scan pyramid's detectors fail to pick it up. After the construction corridor had fulfilled its use, the builders would very likely fill the space with masonry for security reasons. One would not want to leave an easy route for robbers. The last 9 meters of the corridor which we see today may simply have been left unfilled due to time constraints, the priority being to fit the chevrons which we see on the outside today, which also seal of the construction corridor. If this was a construction corridor, how would it connect to the Grand Gallery? In Muon and Goydon's publication, they point out anomalies on some of the lowest blocks of the Grand Gallery's north wall. Muon would also mention these anomalies in a later publication by him, though the passage from the chevrons is omitted in this later publication. Overleaf, we have a drawing from Muon's later publication. Here we can see that the lowest corbel is not developed on the north wall, with blocks number 3 and 4 noticeably different. Could these be a possible entrance into the Grand Gallery for our construction passage? Any such construction passage may not have been entirely level throughout its length, but raised slightly by steps or incline to its required position. This leaves us with the north end of the construction passage by the entrance. Why was it necessary to continue the chevrons further north? The surviving ones today largely seal of the north face corridor, so why continue them? Why not just cover the north face corridor with large blocks of masonry, which would not attract attention? The figure, from Piazzi Smith's publication, shows the masonry joints of the descending passage wall directly below the outer chevrons. Generally, the descending passage, for the most part, down to where the passage is tunneled from the rock, is constructed of large single blocks. Only at its upper end do we see unusual jointing and the presence of 2 courses of masonry at the upper end. We also have a scored line present on both walls of the passage. Those of you who follow my guides know that I see the pyramid construction process as a 2-stage affair. The first would be the erection of the inner stepped core, which would be followed by the casing phase. It might be possible that the north face corridor was part of the inner stepped core, allowing easy access to the interior of the pyramid. When it came to the casing phase of the pyramid, the outer chevrons would be fitted sealing the end of the north face corridor. But this seems illogical, as surely the descending passage below hardly needs any relieving given the little amount of masonry bearing down on it in this location. If they had filled the area with normal core masonry, it would attract no interest. Instead, they used fine Tura chevrons, which Petrie describes as, "The sloping blocks are of remarkably soft, fine-grained limestone, about the best that I have seen, much like that of the roofing of the chamber of Pepi's pyramid." It would be interesting to compare the stone of the chevrons in the north face corridor to those visible on the outside. If the stone robbers had robbed the last pair of chevrons, they would have certainly broken into the north face corridor. The chevrons of the outer casing phase of the pyramid may have had a different role altogether. I suggested that they may have protected an elaborate inner door. Strabo's statement about a movable door is often used to refer to the casing stone covering the descending passage, but I think it could equally refer to a door behind the casing stone. In the north passage of the bent pyramid, we have clear indications of a door behind the casing stone. An elaborate movable door might have required significantly more head height than was available in the descending passage. This would take up space in the large ceiling stones which protected the rest of the passage. Therefore, in order to offer protection for this area, they may have elected to use chevrons to reinforce the area. Clearly, it is very early days for the new discovery of the north face corridor, and it's likely that removal of some of the masonry under the lower chevron will be required in order to access the space and discover the manner of blockage at its south end. Until then, everything is very much a guessing game, but hopefully interesting times are ahead as exploration continues. Okay, thank you for watching my video. See you next time.